leaving little room for government to borrow the 719 billion shillings needed to finance its proposed budget. Jimmy Mbogo has more.
The National Treasury faces a financing hurdle, with the 2023-24 budget creating a budget deficit of 718 billion shillings expected to be financed through borrowing. The challenge is set to arise from the limitation created by the 10 trillion shillings debt ceiling, with Kenya already having borrowed 9.63 trillion shillings, leaving room to only borrow 400 billion shillings. This creates a 318 billion shillings challenge. To address the challenge, Treasury had proposed that the debt ceiling be set at 55% of GDP, but the proposal hit a snag. If the debt ceiling was to be anchored at 55% of GDP, the ceiling would be lowered to just over 7 trillion shillings, well below the current debt ceiling of 10 trillion shillings and the current debt level of 9.63 trillion shillings. In actual sense, at 9.63 trillion shillings, Kenya's debt is currently at 71.8% of GDP. It is this reality that now has the National Treasury looking to reevaluate its stand to a range of between 5% above or below its proposal of 55%. But even this is problematic.
When you began, you said that the debt in relation to GDP is at about 60%. But now we want to come to a debt anchor of 55%. Be that as it may, it means that already we are operating above the 55% that we want to achieve.
A threshold has flexibility. So when you say 55% is a threshold, and it could be plus 5% or minus 5% of that threshold. That is the flexibility.
Where is this? That? If you said 55, I thought 55 is a fixed number, 55%. Where do you get that flexibility you're talking about?
We are talking about threshold. This is what I'm trying to bring in the difference between a limit and the threshold.
But members of parliament are still adamant that debt should be set at a nominal figure, with Treasury still bent on using a percentage of GDP to allow for the National Treasury to ensure that the country remains well within its debt-carrying capacity. Adding that increasing the overhead nominal figure alone will be counterproductive and could see the country bite more than it can chew.
As at now, if we tell you that you can borrow up to, even if you give us the limit of 15 trillion, 20 trillion, we can work with it. But what will be the impact of that to our economy? That's what we are looking at.
We are just getting the flexibility in the sense that you may have a shock on your economy. Your exchange rate really goes in an uncontrollable manner and affects your debt of stock without even additional borrowing.
The lawmakers, however, remain skeptical of the amendments that could impose on their oversight role if the executive is allowed to go beyond their debt limit without prior approval by Parliament, an issue that the National Treasury argues that will not happen.
Honorable Mwalimu, who was fearing that this is taking away the power of Parliament. It doesn't, because we will be coming back to you every year to seek approval of our budget.
Once you remove the powers of setting the limit, the nominal limit as you call it, from Parliament, but somebody will come and misuse this amendment and use Parliament to rubber stamp whatever they do.
The argument from the National Treasury is that moving the debt ceiling from a nominal figure to a GDP anchor will provide room for them not to keep on seeking approval from the National Assembly, an issue that the MPs say will create room for abuse in how the government spends. Jimmy Mbogo, KTN News.